Welcome to Friday, and I hope it's a Friday you enjoy. There's a cold wind blowing outside, but it's nice and warm right here. And so, relax a minute, sit back, and welcome to my little world for a moment or two. A while back, I heard about the death of someone who was influential in my life. Some of you'd know him. His name was Jimmy Allen. In the 1960s, he was perhaps one of the best known preachers among the churches of Christ. He traveled the country, spoke at great and large events. Masses of crowds came to hear him. Jimmy, as he was typically called, had a unique style about him. He was powerful. He had a raspy voice, but touching. He had an endearing story that he would often tell. He had a way of communicating with an audience that people had a hard time not listening intently to what he had to say. He had a Bible-thumping, powerful, pulpit-pounding way of presenting it, and sometimes in such a dramatic fashion that it caught your heart and pulled it up into your throat. He was quite a preacher. I loved getting to hear him. My dad took me to hear him more than once. One time driving quite a few miles away, I think it was well over an hour away, to sit and listen to him in a rodeo arena, and the arena was filled with people, crowds there. And every time he preached, there would be people at the end. As an invitation song would be sung at the end of his lesson, people would come forward. I remember on one occasion sitting in a church building and sitting on about the third row. At the end of the sermon, we began to sing, and he commonly would call for us to sing that old favorite, Just As I Am, and sing it verse upon verse, and sometimes more than once. And people would come forward and they would fill the rows wanting prayers, wanting to be baptized or wanting something like that. Anyway, Jimmy was a powerful presence. I loved getting to hear him. And then when I got to be a college student, I had learned before that, and perhaps one of the reasons I went to Harding College, was I would get to sit in the classroom with Jimmy Allen. There were other great teachers there, but I loved Jimmy's classes as much as I loved any. He was powerful. Loved his classes, ordered and organized. He had a quick mind and a quick recall. He loved to engage and almost do battle while I was there, because that seemed to be a part of his life. Jimmy was quite an athlete. It didn't matter really what the sport was. He loved playing the sport, and he loved playing it with intensity. You didn't want to be on a team against him because he was going to play all out. I looked at him, and his life was that way. Whenever I'd see him driving a car, he was driving it all out with intensity. He would play a sport with great intensity, whether it was football or baseball or basketball or whatever it was. If you were playing against him, you were up against a competition. And that's the way he conducted his Bible classes. They were ordered and well understandable. But he loved to engage in those discussions and would sometimes answer questions as if he was engaged in a great debate. It was fun. I found him intimidating to deal with on a personal level, maybe because I'd seen him in such large gatherings and so forth. And I never approached him as Brother Jimmy, as many did, but I'd say, Brother Allen. I said, could we or would we? And he'd always give that look, and you'd think he'd ask my mother how you ought to look at me. But he was always fair and always good. Enjoyed his classes. He was a man who rethought his ideas more than once. Sometimes he was criticized because he would back up and he would say, I've changed my mind on this. I approached him one time about a book of sermons, because I've got, I think, every book of sermons he produced. About a book of sermons I didn't have, and I wanted it because I loved reading his sermons, because when you would read them, you could hear his voice in the background almost, and it was him all over. But I asked him about it, and he said to me, and he said, oh, Russ, he said, that book's out of print. I made so many mistakes in it, I didn't want to print it again. That was Jimmy Allen. He was unafraid to say he was wrong. He didn't like you to tell him he was wrong, but he was unafraid to say he was wrong. You may wonder why I'm telling you about Jimmy Allen. I enjoyed him. I enjoyed listening to him, enjoyed being in his classes. And I was saddened to hear that his mind was deteriorating, and ultimately I was saddened to hear that he had passed away, because it was an era and it was a special time. But I was reminded of a couple of scriptures that came to mind. One was in Colossians 4 and verse 6. It says, "Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one." The other scripture is about a man by the name of Apollos. And it says, "Now a certain Jew named Apollos, born in Alexandria, was an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures." That's true, Acts 18:24. I thought about Jimmy Allen and his story and how he might not have grown to be the man he was, but he had the opportunities and the challenges of his life came forward and perhaps formed him into the special person he was. I think we ought to be thankful for people like that, people who have that special talents and those great ways about them. But more than that, I want you to think today, you have the opportunity to be that influence. Listen carefully to those influences in your life that are for the good. Be thankful for them, no matter what they may be, as intimidating as they might be, but as thoughtful as they might be. Engage them in your life and hold them dear to your heart. They pass far too quickly. But you know, just around the corner, somebody may be watching you. They may be thinking you are that voice. You are that special one. Be unafraid to share your story. Be unafraid to correct yourself. And be unafraid to stand strong, competitive with what you believe. Hey, Jimmy had an influence, and I appreciated him. You have one too. It's a great Friday. Hope you have a great weekend ahead of you. Look forward to worshiping with Christians on Sunday. It'll be a great day. And I thank you for being with me today, and we'll look forward to more things right down the road.